Could a forbidden love be the key to survival in a world turned upside down? The grand hall of the elegant Parisian ballroom shimmered with 1,000 crystal lights. The evening air was filled with the enchanting strains of a waltz as couples glided gracefully across the floor. The room was a world of swirling gowns and impeccably tailored coats, and Élise Dubois moved through it with the grace of a swan. She was a vision of aristocratic beauty, her golden ringlets cascading like liquid sunlight over her delicate shoulders, her porcelain skin glowing in the soft illumination. Her eyes, the color of sapphires, sparkled with the vivacity of youth, and the jeweled bodice of her gown caught the light in 1,000 different ways. But beneath her graceful facade, Élise concealed more than just the regal lineage of the Dubois family. Behind those sapphire eyes lay the secrets of a soul grappling with the shifting sands of an era on the brink of transformation. She watched as the nobility twirled in their ostentatious finery, acutely aware of the gathering storm of change and of the people beyond the gilded walls who yearned for justice. Amid the glittering spectacle, Antoine Leclerc moved with a different rhythm. His steps were not those of a refined nobleman, but of a man who had walked the streets of Paris and felt its pulse. Antoine was a passionate revolutionary, a fervent advocate for the rights of the common people. His rough-hewn features and calloused hands were the result of a life of struggle and hardship. Antoine had come to the ballroom not by invitation, but by the tenacity of his conviction. He had infiltrated the world of the nobility in pursuit of justice and equality, his fiery determination hidden behind a mask of respectful deference. And so, amid the swirling dances and the laughter of the privileged, Élise and Antoine found themselves on a collision course. It was a meeting of two worlds, each representative of a distinct segment of society. Their eyes met in a moment of serendipity, as if fate itself had orchestrated this clandestine encounter. Élise, with her noble lineage, and Antoine, the champion of the people, locked gazes in that exquisite ballroom, and in that instant, the boundaries that separated them began to blur. Élise was drawn to Antoine's unyielding spirit, his fiery gaze and his untamed vigor, which stood in stark contrast to the genteel but suffocating world of her upbringing. Antoine, in turn, was captivated by Élise's beauty, but he sensed there was more to her than met the eye. He saw the turmoil in her sapphire eyes, the conflict between the aristocratic life she had been born into and the yearning for something more. In that moment, the grand ballroom faded into the background, and it was as if they were the only two souls in the world. As they shared a fleeting electric connection across the glittering floor, they both understood that their lives had been forever altered. Their hearts had ignited, and the flame of love had begun to flicker amidst the gathering storm of the French Revolution. In the verdant embrace of Elise's family garden, the world seemed to hush its tumultuous roars. The fragrant roses swayed gently, their petals brushing against each other like whispers. The soft murmur of the fountain provided a soothing backdrop to a conversation that had the power to shatter worlds. Antoine Leclerc, the fiery revolutionary, stood beside Élise, the noblewoman, amidst this private oasis. Here, the rigid constraints of their respective social strata could be momentarily set aside, and their souls could speak more freely. Antoine's eyes bore the traces of his tumultuous life, etched with the lines of struggle and conviction. Élise watched him with a mixture of fascination and anxiety. This clandestine rendezvous had been her choice, a daring step that could unravel the delicate balance she had been raised to protect. Élise, Antoine's voice was both gentle and imploring. I had to know the truth. Your family, your background, they are not what they seem, are they? Élise hesitated, her fingers trailing over the petals of a rose, as if seeking solace in its delicate beauty. You're right, Antoine, she admitted with a heavy sigh. My name is Dubois, and I come from a long line of nobility. The opulence that surrounds me is but a mask. Antoine nodded, a mixture of emotions clouding his gaze. I knew there was something different about you, Élise, and I am a son of the streets, of the people who have borne the weight of centuries of injustice. How could our worlds ever meet without tearing us apart? Elise's sapphire eyes met Antoine's, filled with a profound yearning. I don't have the answers, Antoine, but I am drawn to your passion and your commitment to change. It's a fire that I've longed to embrace, even if it means renouncing the privileges I was born into. Their hands touched, and for a brief moment, the chasm that separated their lives seemed to shrink. Antoine's fingers caressed Élise's, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that had ignited between them. Yet, in that garden, they were not merely two individuals entangled in a forbidden love affair. They were emblematic of an era in flux, where tradition clashed with revolution, and hearts clashed with the constraints of class. Élise's soul wrestled with her loyalty to the Dubois family and the pull of Antoine's ideals. She had always known that the path of love and revolution was fraught with uncertainty, but it was a path she was now willing to tread. Antoine, for his part, grappled with the fear that his love for Élise might cost her more than she was willing to sacrifice. He understood the complexities of her position, but was ready to stand by her side as long as she would have him. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across the garden, Élise and Antoine found themselves at a crossroads. In that secret garden, they were not just Élise and Antoine. They were the embodiment of a world on the cusp of change. The city of Paris had transformed into a cauldron of dissent. Streets once lined with genteel shops and bustling marketplaces were now scarred by barricades and covered with slogans of revolt. The air was thick with tension, and the atmosphere was charged with the fervor of change. Élise and Antoine's clandestine meetings had become more frequent, hidden amidst the tumult. As they stood side by side in the midst of a seething crowd, Antoine held Élise's hand tightly. Her once pristine gown was now marred by the dust of the streets, and her sapphire eyes had witnessed the brutality of the uprising. Still, she remained resolute. Antoine's heart swelled with pride and concern in equal measure. Her presence in the crowd was a testament to her unwavering commitment to their shared cause. The mob around them chanted slogans that shook the very foundations of the city. The cries for liberty and equality resonated with a fervor that reverberated in the hearts of all who were present. Antoine looked at Élise, and in her eyes, he saw not just the woman he loved, but a symbol of a world that was teetering on the precipice of transformation. As night fell, the streets were illuminated by torches and the ominous glow of unrest. The revolution had taken on a life of its own, and the violence and uncertainty that permeated the city began to cast a long shadow. It was in these moments of turmoil that Élise realized that her love for Antoine was not just a romantic ideal. It was a commitment to a cause that demanded everything she had to give. Her heart was torn between the love she held for Antoine and the world she had been raised in. Antoine, on the other hand, grappled with the fear that his love for Élise might be the very thing that put her in danger. He had seen the relentless brutality, and he knew that the lines between friend and foe were often blurred in this chaotic world. As they stood in the midst of the tumultuous crowd, their hands tightly clasped, the very forces that had brought them together now threatened to tear them apart. In the streets of Paris, Élise and Antoine found themselves in a battle for their very survival. The walls of La Force prison seemed to close in on Antoine as he sat in the dimly lit cell, his thoughts consumed by the whirlwind of events that had led him to this point. The cacophony of despair and anger from the other prisoners formed an unceasing backdrop to his inner turmoil. His incarceration had come as a result of his fervent pursuit of justice. Antoine had expected that he might one day face the consequences of his actions, but he had not anticipated the pain of separation from Élise. She had become the very embodiment of his ideals, and her absence was a constant ache in his heart. Élise, on the other side of the prison bars, had also endured sleepless nights and the torment of not knowing what had become of Antoine. She had used every resource at her disposal to locate him, to seek a path that would lead her back to the man she loved. The nobility she had been born into had shown her little kindness as they sought to distance themselves from the taint of her association with a revolutionary. She had been met with icy glares and bitter reproach, even from those she had once called friends. Yet Élise's determination had not wavered. She had navigated the treacherous waters of a city in turmoil, delving into the underground networks of those who opposed the oppressive regime. Her quest was a dangerous one that led her into the shadows of the revolution, where secrecy was paramount. It was in these clandestine meetings, conducted in the heart of the city's labyrinthine passages, that Élise's network had revealed the location of Antoine. It had taken every ounce of her fortitude to gain access to La Force, to walk the corridors of the dreaded prison. The reunion was fraught with the weight of unspoken words. Antoine, though weakened by his time in captivity, still bore the fierce determination that had drawn Élise to him. She, in turn, had become a different woman, her aristocratic facade cast aside in favor of the resolve that had driven her to this point. Their hands met through the cold iron bars, and Antoine's eyes searched Élise's for the answers that had eluded them. Her voice was hushed, trembling with a mixture of longing and fear. "Antoine, I had to find you. I cannot bear this separation." He pressed his lips to her delicate hand, his voice hoarse but filled with tenderness. "Élise, my love, you risk everything to be here. The revolution has become a tempest, and our love is a fragile thing in the face of such turmoil." Élise's gaze was unwavering. "Antoine, I will not let the chaos of the world tear us apart. We will find a way, together. Our love is our beacon, even in this darkest hour." Their love was a fragile flame, flickering amidst the chaos of a world in upheaval, but it was a flame that refused to be extinguished. In the heart of La Force prison, Élise and Antoine clung to one another, their union a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The city of Paris continued to convulse with revolution, each passing day bringing new uncertainties and dangers. Élise had made the daring decision to intervene and secure Antoine's release from La Force. She had enlisted the help of trusted contacts within the underground network, individuals who shared her conviction for change and were willing to risk everything for their cause. Her decision was fraught with peril, for her actions could not go unnoticed, and they were certain to provoke the ire of both the aristocracy and the revolutionary factions. As Élise stood with the group of conspirators in the dimly lit alley behind a safe house, the urgency of their mission weighed heavily on her shoulders. The flickering lanterns cast long shadows across her face, highlighting the determination in her sapphire eyes. Antoine was a shadow in her thoughts, his image a constant presence in her mind. She could not bear to see him suffer any longer in the cold, unforgiving prison. The group of conspirators was a motley assembly of individuals, each with their own motivations and grievances against the regime. They moved with a shared purpose, as if the specter of revolution had united them in a common cause. Élise was but a specter herself, her noble heritage concealed beneath a tattered cloak. She had made the decision to walk away from the life of privilege she had been born into, to embrace the cause of the people and the man she loved. The plan they had devised was audacious, a daring raid on La Force prison to secure Antoine's release. Élise's heart pounded in her chest as they made their way through the labyrinthine streets of Paris, the darkened alleys a stark contrast to the opulence of her former life. The hours passed in tense silence, the city enveloped in the shroud of night. Finally, the moment arrived, and they descended upon La Force, masked and determined. The prison was a grim fortress, its walls bearing witness to the suffering of countless souls. As the conspirators clashed with the prison guards, Élise's heart pounded in her chest. Her voice cried out for Antoine, and her pleas were met with the thunderous roar of the revolution. The prison doors swung open, and in the midst of the chaos, Antoine emerged, his eyes locking onto Élise's. Their reunion was fraught with the weight of their shared experiences, the sacrifices they had made for one another, and the cause they believed in. Antoine's touch was a lifeline, a symbol of the love that had withstood the trials of time. But the revolution raged on, and the challenges that lay ahead were as formidable as the storm that had brought them together. Élise had renounced her noble heritage to stand beside Antoine, and the path they had chosen was one of relentless upheaval. The world around them had been irrevocably altered. The revolution had reached its zenith with the fall of the monarchy, and Paris had transformed into a city of radical transformation. The Palace of Versailles had been abandoned, and the grandeur of the aristocracy was reduced to a fading memory. Élise and Antoine had found refuge in a modest apartment in the heart of the city. The room was adorned with little more than their love and a few cherished possessions as they began the journey of building a life together. The walls of their small sanctuary bore witness to the trials and tribulations they had endured, from the siege of La Force to the tumultuous days of street protests. The world outside was a constant reminder of the forces that threatened to tear them apart. As Élise gazed out of the window at the changed city, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dislocation. The palaces she had once called home, the grandeur she had been born into, now seemed like distant memories. Her life had taken a profound turn, and the luxuries of her noble upbringing had given way to the austerity of their current existence. Antoine, too, was grappling with the immense responsibility that came with being a leader of the revolution. His days were consumed by meetings, decisions, and the weight of the cause he had dedicated his life to. He was a man transformed. Their love, though, remained a constant in the tumult of their lives. It was a refuge from the storm, a reminder of the unwavering connection they shared. They were not just lovers, but comrades. Their conversations were a blend of tenderness and fervor, filled with dreams of a more just society and a future where their love could flourish without fear. The days were marked by uncertainty, and the forces of history continued to shape their lives in ways they could not predict. In the city consumed by change, they had become legends, a story whispered through the cobblestone streets of Paris. Their love was a melody that played on, its notes resounding through time and history, a tale that defied the very essence of its era.